Students. Today I'm going to show you how to use Yupo paper to create some non-objective artwork. Yupo paper comes in a variety of different sizes. This is an 11 by 14 pack. It comes in 9 by 12. We're going to be working small on sheets that are, I think, 5 by 7. The interesting thing about Yupo paper is it's actually plastic. It's completely non-absorbent. You can't tear it. It's like indestructible. And the great thing about it is since it's non-absorbent, you can actually reactivate the pigment on it at any time, unlike a watercolor paper that is absorbent, where you can sort of reactivate it with some water, but it's pretty much laid into the paper. Right, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean now. You're going to actually be working on 2 different paintings at the same time. Because the paper is non-absorbent, it takes forever for things to dry on it. That's why we're going to work on it at 2 at the same time. So a couple things that you're going to want to use and that you're going to need for this is some watercolor brushes. You have them in your art kit. You can use those. Don't use the acrylic brushes. You want the watercolor brushes. You can get your small watercolor palette out of your art kit as well. You can use the liquid watercolor. You can use the liquid acrylic. You can use a variety of different drawing inks on this. And I'll have this all set out for you. You can also use India ink for this assignment, in black or in white. Another thing that goes great on this paper are your water-based markers that are also in your art kit, and those can be used as well. Another thing that you may want to access is some rubbing alcohol, as well as a spray bottle full of water is also a helpful tool. Go ahead and see how this paper works. First thing I'm going to do with the paper here is I'm actually just going to wet some spots on it. I'm not going to spray the whole thing. I'm just going to lay some water down on the paper. Again, the water lays on top of the paper. It doesn't actually absorb into the paper. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and lay some watercolor into that wet area. Okay, you can see as soon as I make a mark how the color kind of bleeds and runs. Okay. And notice it's only going into the areas where I lay down the water. It will not travel outside of those areas at this point. Okay. And it has this really great organic kind of flowing feel about it. Now, let's say I wanted to not wet the paper first, and I just wanted to lay the watercolor directly onto the dry paper. That is also something that you can do. And you can see the difference when I do that. It doesn't get that, those markings. Okay? And you can paint directly on it dry as well. We'll see how that dries here later on in the class period. Okay. Something else to think about. So this is just the basic watercolor in that tiny little palette that you have. Another thing you can do potentially is take your water bottle and spritz your entire paper. And now I'm going to use the liquid watercolor in the droppers. Okay. And you can see again, it's because I used the spray bottle and it's kind of misted on. The the liquid watercolor is only going into those areas where it's hit by water. Okay. Now I'll show you using the drawing ink. Okay, this is ink and this is watercolor paint. They are different. They have different binding material, and they are going to look different when you use them on the paper. Okay, you can see when I use the ink, because it is a different consistency, it bled in there, but here it's more keeping its shape and its form. Okay, but it's also nice and vibrant as well. Another way to use this paper is using the pack of markers that you have in your art kit. Okay. So the markers are water-based, which means that they will be activated with water. So you can draw on this paper with markers very easily. And then if you take water, it will actually activate it as if it's paint or if it's watercolor, because they are water-based. Okay. You can see that's also creating like a really nice, interesting effect. Okay. Let's see what happens when we use a little bit of this rubbing alcohol on our page. All right, this is in a squirt bottle, but you could also use it in a dropper form. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and spritz here. You can see what's happening is the watercolor is actually being repelled by the rubbing alcohol. So if you want to use rubbing alcohol, it'll actually create an area where it's repelling and pushing that away. You can see how it looks completely different now. It beat it up in a completely different way. Okay. The liquid acrylics will work very similarly to your drawing inks. And then your India inks as well are nice because, and I would use these with a brush unless you're planning on dropping them on. And you can actually paint with these, and because they are more dense, they will be better at holding like an actual shape on your page. Okay. And they can also be activated with water as well. So if I wanted to, I could, take my spray bottle and that at this point it's acting very similarly to the watercolor once I've activated it with some water. So I've created some interesting textures and patterns and colors on my Yupo paper. At this point, you're going to need to let them dry. Like I said, because it's non-absorbent means that it's going to take a while for the pigment to dry on your paper. What I want you to do is just push them to the center of your table for drying purposes. And please make sure you come back and get them at the end of the period and take them home for your virtual day, because we're going to be working with them in our sketchbook tomorrow.